Our journey into the heart of the American Mafia begins not on bustling city streets, but on the sun-baked, rugged island of 19th century Sicily. This was a land of stark beauty, yet also profound and relentless hardship. For centuries, its people had endured foreign rule, endemic poverty, and a feudal land ownership system that kept the vast majority of peasants in a state of near servitude. A deep and abiding distrust of official authority became woven into the cultural fabric. The distant state was seen not as a protector, but as an oppressor, and its laws were things to be circumvented, not obeyed. In this vacuum of legitimate justice, a desperate need for order emerged. When the state failed to protect its citizens, the citizens created their own protection. Informal secret brotherhoods began to take root, clandestine groups of men who offered a crude, twisted form of justice. Bound by fierce loyalty and a sacred, unwritten code of absolute silence known as Omertà, these men of honor became de facto authorities in their local villages. They arbitrated disputes, recovered stolen goods, and protected landowners for a price. But power, once seized, quickly corrupted their initial intentions. Protection spiraled into extortion, and their code of honor became a shield for ruthless intimidation. These groups seized control, exploiting the very people they claimed to defend. This was the genesis of the Mafia, an institution born from desperation and nurtured in a climate of fear. As the 19th century drew to a close, these harsh conditions spurred a massive exodus. Millions of Italians, the majority from the impoverished south and Sicily, sought a new life across the Atlantic. They embarked on arduous ocean journeys, packed into the steerage class of steamships, carrying with them not just their meager belongings, but their hopes, their traditions, and in some cases the very structures of the secret brotherhoods they had known. They arrived in America, a land of promise that often delivered only a different kind of hardship. Many settled in the teeming, chaotic immigrant neighborhoods of New York City. The Lower East Side and East Harlem became vibrant but isolated enclaves, overflowing with new arrivals. Here they faced a new set of challenges: rampant discrimination, formidable language barriers, and brutal labor exploitation in factories and on construction sites. Official institutions, from the police to the politicians, often failed them, misunderstood their culture, or actively preyed upon their vulnerability. It was in this fertile ground of alienation and neglect that the seeds of the old world found new soil in which to grow. The absence of a trusted, protective governmental presence created a power vacuum, just as it had in Sicily. This vacuum was eagerly filled by those willing to offer protection and mediate disputes for a price. The old ways, forged in the dusty hills of Sicily, mutated and adapted to the concrete jungle of New York. A brotherhood of rural enforcers began its dark transformation into an urban criminal empire. Among the earliest and most significant figures to emerge from this chaos was Giuseppe Morello. Arriving from Corleone, Sicily in the 1890s, Morello was a shrewd, calculating, and utterly ruthless leader, known as the clutch hand due to a congenital deformity of his right hand. He possessed a brilliant criminal mind. He quickly established what historians consider one of the first truly influential Italian-American crime families in the United States. Morello's 107th Street mob started with sophisticated counterfeiting operations, printing bogus currency that was notoriously difficult to detect. But their portfolio of crime quickly diversified into extortion, illegal gambling, and the infiltration of labor unions. Working closely with Morello was his ambitious and notoriously brutal brother-in-law Ignazio Saietta, better known as Lupo the Wolf. Lupo was the muscle to Morello's brain, a charismatic but terrifying enforcer who built an empire of fear in East Harlem. His name became synonymous with the Black Hand racket, a brutal form of extortion that terrorized the Italian-American community. The method was chillingly simple. A merchant or a prosperous individual would receive a letter, often marked with a crude black handprint, demanding money. The letters promised violent consequences: vandalism, kidnapping, or even death if the demands were not met. Few dared to defy the threats, and even fewer would ever go to the police. The immigrants' deep-seated distrust of American law enforcement, combined with the Mafia's enforcement of Omertà, created an impenetrable wall of silence. Lupo's reputation for extreme violence ensured compliance. He and his men were responsible for dozens of murders, their victims often disposed of in gruesome ways to send a clear message to the community. Together, Morello and Lupo laid the dark, sprawling groundwork for organized crime in America. Their methods were a calculated blend of protection, patronage, and the ruthless elimination of any and all dissent. Within Little Italy and other enclaves, their organization became a parallel government, They solved problems the police couldn't, they provided jobs on the docks or in businesses they controlled, and they enforced their own brutal laws. For many immigrants, it was a grim choice: pledge allegiance and gain a measure of security, or maintain independence and face severe, often deadly consequences. These early syndicates were not merely collections of thugs, they were calculated enterprises. They understood the psychology of fear and the power of loyalty within insular communities. They preyed on their own people, yet paradoxically they were also seen by some as community leaders, men of honor who could get things done. This duality allowed them to become deeply entrenched, their roots wrapping around the foundations of the immigrant experience. As their power grew, these early syndicates began to grow beyond their own communities, forging alliances and sparking violent rivalries with other ethnic gangs, particularly Irish and Jewish organizations who also vied for control of the city's underworld. But a monumental turning point was on the horizon, an event that would transform these burgeoning gangs into empires of unimaginable wealth and power. In 1920, the United States ratified the 18th Amendment, ushering in the era of Prohibition. The nationwide ban on the production, importation and sale of alcoholic beverages was intended to be a great moral experiment. Instead, it created an unprecedented illicit economy, a goldmine, for anyone willing and organized enough to exploit it. Almost overnight, bootlegging became one of the most lucrative enterprises in American history. The Mafia, with its existing clandestine structures, its networks of trusted associates, and its proficiency in violence and intimidation, was perfectly positioned to seize this opportunity. Men like Morello and Lupo, and the new generation of bosses rising in their wake, immediately pivoted to control the flow of illegal liquor. This was not a simple operation. It required vast organization, significant capital, and disciplined networks. It involved smuggling whiskey from Canada, rum from the Caribbean islands via offshore rum rows, and setting up thousands of illegal breweries and distilleries in secret locations throughout the city. The influx of cash was staggering. This new wealth allowed the nascent crime families to scale up their operations exponentially. Their most vital tool was no longer just the gun, but the bribe. Corruption became a primary currency, infiltrating every level of society. Police captains, patrolmen, politicians, prosecutors, and judges were placed on the criminal payroll, ensuring that justice rarely touched the syndicate leaders. Law enforcement would turn a blind eye to speakeasies, provide tip-offs about impending raids, or lose key evidence in court cases. This systemic corruption cemented the Mafia's power, making them seem untouchable. The Prohibition era saw the rapid consolidation of these criminal enterprises. Smaller gangs were either absorbed by or violently eliminated by larger, more organized syndicates. Territorial disputes over bootlegging routes and speakeasy operations erupted into bloody gang wars on the city streets. Yet, from this chaos, a more organized hierarchical structure began to emerge, laying the blueprint for what would later become known as New York's Five Families. From the rugged, sun-baked hills of Sicily, a harsh code had crossed the ocean. It mutated, adapted, and flourished in the concrete jungle of New York. The men of honor, who once arbitrated disputes over stolen livestock, now commanded criminal empires with national reach. Their power was no longer just physical, it was psychological. Built on a foundation of fear, cultural deference, and the corruption of American institutions. Through relentless ambition, cunning strategy, and unsparing violence, pioneers like Giuseppe Morello and Ignazio Lupo laid the groundwork for an organization that would plague America for generations. Their story is a dark saga of adaptation born of desperation in one world, and nurtured by illicit opportunity in another. It's a stark reminder of how extreme social and economic circumstances can forge dangerous paths, and how a vacuum of power will always be filled, for better or for worse. The early days of the American Mafia were a brutal, formative chapter in the nation's history. These men shaped the urban landscape, influenced politics, and left an indelible and bloody mark on society. The names and faces would change over the decades, but the methods of control, the code of silence, and the pursuit of power at any cost would endure. Understanding these origins is crucial, for it helps to comprehend the complex interplay of poverty, immigration, and institutional failure that allowed this dark chapter to be written. The seeds of crime, sown in the desperation of Sicilian villages, found their ultimate brutal bloom in the land of opportunity, changing a nation forever.